Hello again. Now, I know what you guys have all been wondering. We gave you all these vocabulary words at the beginning of this packet, and we've barely touched that glossary. Well, that's all about to change. This lesson is particularly heavy in the vocabulary, so I've made a separate vocabulary video for you guys to fill out that glossary. Go ahead and turn to that glossary page. We're going to need to copy some definitions down. Sorry that they're all clumped together in one lesson, but that's just the way it worked out this time. So go ahead, turn your glossary, and I'll go ahead and start sharing that vocabulary with you guys. Alright, make sure you watch the second video after you finish the vocabulary. See you then. Alright, now that you guys are in the glossary section of your packet, let's go ahead and copy these words down into our glossary. We're going to start out with an average rate of change. This is the change in value of a quantity by the elapsed time. For a function, this is the change in the y value divided by the change in the x value for two distinct points on the graph. What you will often hear this interchanged with is the word slope. You'll often hear either one used to describe the same thing. So this is going to be the change in the y, or the difference in the y values divided by the changes in the x values. And we'll look at what that formula will look like a little bit later on. Right now, let's go ahead and just get the vocabulary down. Remember, pause the video as you need to so that you can get every word from the definition copied down into the glossary. So we're also going to have a word that is called continuous, and it's going to describe a connected set of numbers such as an interval. Continuous is something that you can draw, a graph that you can draw without picking up your pencil. It's going to have no holes, it's going to have no gaps, it's going to be solid from one end to the other. In this particular unit, Unit 2, we're looking at linear equations. Our linear equations are always going to be continuous functions. So this is going to be an important vocabulary word for us to know. Alright, similar to the average rate of change is the continuous rate of change with respect to the variable x of a linear function y equals f of x. And we'll talk about what that little notation is in section 2C. But for right now, just go ahead and look over that and see that y is going to be the same thing as f of x. If you ever see f of x, all that means is y. It's just a fancy way of writing y. Alright, so with respect to the variable x of a linear function, the constant rate of change is the slope of its graph. So pretty similar to average rate of change. Oops, threw the screen up over everything. Let me drag that back down for you guys. Alright, our next word is going to be the coordinate plane. This is the two-dimensional plane containing the x and y axis upon which we're going to be doing our graphing and our lines. We're going to graph points and lines. Now, when you get into higher level math, you'll look at some other planes. There's some planes that have a z-axis that are three-dimensional, but we're just going to focus in this course on the two-dimensional plane that has just the x-axis and the y-axis. Alright, if you haven't gotten this vocabulary down, go ahead and pause it before you let me continue on to the next page. Otherwise, let's continue to move forward. Alright, discrete. Discrete is kind of the opposite of continuous. For continuous graphs, we can draw them without picking up our pencil. Everything's connected, everything's included. Discrete is going to be when we have holes in the graph. We're either going to have holes in the graph, or we're going to start at one place, pick up our pencil, and start somewhere else. But that is going to be discrete. It's a set with elements that are disconnected. So it's the opposite of continuous. Domain is going to be a big vocabulary word this year. We're just going to touch on it in Unit 2A, but when we get to 2C, we're really going to dig deep into domain. So you'll see this again, I promise you, later in the year. But the domain is basically your x values. The formal definition is the set of x coordinates of the set of points on a graph, or the set of x coordinates of a given set of ordered pairs. It's going to be our input, which is what we're putting into the function. And that is domain. So basically, that's a long definition to say that the domain is your x values. Alright, linear functions. Everything in Unit 2 that we are looking at is going to be a linear function. And a linear function will always have a constant rate of change. That means that that rate of change will be the same no matter where you're looking at the graph. We'll look at some functions in Units 3 and 4 where it's not necessarily a constant rate of change, but everything in Unit 2 should have that constant rate of change. And all our graphs are going to be straight lines. We're not going to have any funky curves or anything like that. It's going to be a straight line all the way through. All right, the next word is very similar to a linear function, and that's going to be a linear model. The big difference between a linear function and a linear model, the linear function is just a graph or an equation kind of with no context or no background information on it. But a linear model is going to be when we're representing a real world problem. So this is going to be what you're going to be using in your word problems when you're actually modeling a specific situation and not just graphing a random line or working with a random equation. This is going to be something where we're actually applying it to a real situation. We're modeling it, if you will. Alright, again, pause the video if you need to. Get that vocabulary down. And we'll move on to our last page. I promise we're almost there. We just got a couple more vocabulary words left. Alright, ordered pair. You guys should be familiar with an ordered pair. It's a pair of numbers, x and y, that indicate the position of a point on a Cartesian plane. Now, Cartesian plane is another word for coordinate plane. It's that xy axis that we defined earlier. It's named after a mathematician named Descartes, and it has also that name of Cartesian plane. So Cartesian plane, coordinate plane, same thing. But just remember with the ordered pair, x is always first, y is always second. And I'll say that again. X is always first, y is always second. That seems easy, but it's something that confuses students every year. Easy way to remember that, alphabet. X comes before y. So in the ordered pair, x comes before y as well. Alright, the range is the set of all possible outputs of a function. It's your y values. So going back and reviewing the vocabulary, domain x values, range y values. Domain x values, range y values. Again, range will be very important when we get to Unit 2C. Alright, slope is the word I talked to you guys about earlier. It's very similar to the average rate of change. It's the ratio of the vertical and horizontal changes between 2 points of a surface or line. It's going to be your rise over run, if you remember that from middle school. And that's going to be something that's really going to help us graph lines in this lesson. Alright, that wraps up the vocabulary. Go ahead and Alright, that wraps up the vocabulary. Make sure you watch the second Alright, that wraps up the vocabulary. Make sure that you watch the second video. That's going to be where we're going to do all our notes. Alright, see you guys in just a minute over on that video.